Hi, I'm me, Kevin. In this video, we're going to talk about 10 things to protect your money, whether or not we're going into an economic downturn. Let's get started. The very first thing that you need to do is think about accessing capital while it's still possible to do this. This obviously won't apply to everyone, but about 2/3 of you are homeowners. Now is an interesting time, even when rates are high in the near term, to potentially look into a refinance, but I want you to do something special. I want you to take negative points. Now, this video isn't going to be about the real estate market, but let's give you a quick synopsis. In certain overbuilt markets, especially after the COVID boom, we're likely going to continue to see prices decline in some markets. For example, if you look at Austin, Texas, the last 3 years, year over year, have had negative prices year after year. Well, that's because we had a COVID bubble, overbuild, oversupply, and all of a sudden the rush of people moving there slowed because others weren't squeezed out of areas like California under the extremeness of some of the lockdowns California faced. This isn't designed to be political either, it's just simply to say the fact. The Austin real estate market has been down year over year for the last 3 years in a row. What you want to do, even if rates are high, is consider refinancing to tap some of the equity if you have equity in your home. So for example, if your home value's ballooned up, even if you have a lower interest rate locked in, let's say if you have a $200,000 loan locked in over here, and now your home is, let's say, worth, or let's say it was worth $800,000, whenever you got your loan, it was worth less, and now it's come down a little bit. Let's say now it's worth $700,000 or whatever it is, $620,000, whatever. It could make sense to refinance. Even though you're losing that lower rate, you could potentially access more capital. This is going to become very important for when we get into the buy the dip phase. Because let's say you have now $400,000 of equity that you could access, you pay off your old loan, you obviously have to make sure you can afford the 30-year mortgage payment that you're doing on this. But what you've done is you've freed up the difference. You now have access to $200,000 of more capital. It's really important that you don't go below that money on like an RV or something crazy. Instead, be ready, be prepared to buy the dip, because that's what we're going to talk about in a moment as well. And those could be business opportunities, they could be stocks, it could be real estate, wherever stress shows itself. And as Buffett always says, wherever blood ends up on the streets, that's the time to get greedy, right? But you need access to capital to actually do anything. So what I like to say is, consider using that piggy bank of your home or of your rental real estate or whatever, just to have access to capital. Now again, don't blow that money. It's very dangerous to utilize your real estate equity, because oftentimes what people do is they'll pay off credit card debt and they'll get right back into credit card debt. That's a big mistake. So you want to be careful with what you do with this. This needs to be strategic. But this video is for adults. So what's also important is that you take those negative points, in my opinion. This is not personalized financial advice for you. This is broad advice for you to consider. When you talk to your mortgage loan originator, your lender, okay, in English, your lender, when you talk to them, I want them to give you negative points as an option for you to consider. I would like negative points, and ask for a menu. So ask for a menu that gives you negative 0.5, negative 1, negative 1.5, negative 2, and then do negative 3. Okay, so give you a menu. All right, why would you do negative points? First, and what does this even mean? If the economy enters a downturn, we would anticipate that over time interest rates are going to plummet. We can't guarantee this. But if there's a downturn and you want to use that potential capital on an opportunity, interest rates are likely to plummet. When interest rates plummet, the goal would be to refinance this debt that you took on, that $400,000 lower. No guarantees, obviously, if the property values go down. That could be a risk, so you want to be comfortable paying that payment. What negative points allow you to do is lower your closing costs now. So let's say you have closing costs of your refinance to get that $400,000 of $8,000 now. What some people will do is they'll do what's called a rate buy down, and they're like, look, it's going to cost me $8,000 to refinance, and I'm going to get a rate of, let's say, 6.5%. So some people are like, oh, that's so high. So they'll actually choose to pay $12,000, and they'll take an interest rate of, let's say, 5.9%. So now they feel like they got a better deal, but they spend an extra $4,000. Okay, the break even on that at minimum is going to be about 7.5 years. Realistically, the break even on this difference over here is probably going to be closer to 10 to 12 years. So that extra investment you're making for the savings and the monthly payment is going to take quite a while to break even. Not always. You can do the math yourself. That's why I say get a menu and do the math based on what you get. But here's what I like to do. I actually like to get negative points. So what I say is I don't want to pay $8,000. I actually want you to give me $8,000 and cover those closing costs. Give me a higher interest rate. So I might go in and say, give me a 7.4, and I want my closing costs to be 0. In other words, they gave me -2 points to cover my closing costs, right? That might be the -2 option over here. Now all of a sudden I have more access to capital. Yes, I have a shorter term, higher rate, but if the economy does end up falling, which is when I would use and deploy that capital anyway, I should be able to refinance. Again, predicated on home values and you having a job to do that. So as with any strategy, there is risk and you have to go in knowing this. Now, another strategy that people like to take advantage of in these environments, and again, there are upsides and downsides with everything, but I like home equity lines of credit. So let's say you're in this situation where you own a home and you have a 2.9% interest rate on your $200,000 loan, and you're like, Kevin, I don't want to get rid of that loan. I don't want to refinance that at higher. Well, okay, that's smart. That's logical. So what you do is, let's say you have a $200,000 loan, and let's say the property is worth $800,000 in value. So you have all this untapped equity right here. So what you want to do is you want to hop in with a home equity line of credit for, let's say, up to 620, that'd be 80%. Maybe you could get up to 90%. Go to a local credit union for these, by the way. Usually the bigger banks like the Big Four, Chase, Bank of America, they're not going to have good options for this. Go to the local credit unions. So whatever county you're in, that county credit union, type that into Google. You'll get plenty of options. Ask them what their HELOC programs are. They'll often even waive your first year application fee. Sometimes even they'll waive your appraisal fee. Okay, so you have the difference of 80% of that, so let's say 620. You have the difference of this and this available. You could get $420,000. Oh, that's perfect. $420,000 potential line of credit on this property. Now, you might be saying to yourself, but Kevin, interest rates on this line of credit, that's insane. I'm going to pay 10% in interest on this credit line. That's insane. No, you're not. Not going to use it. So take the equity line of credit, establish the credit. So money tool number 2 is establish the line of credit. Okay, number 1 was negative points and establishing credit that way. Number 2 is get a HELOC. A home equity line of credit charges you no interest until you actually write the check and use it. Imagine that a HELOC is just like opening or applying for a credit card. It doesn't mean you're paying 10% on the $420,000 or 22% of your credit card just because you opened the credit card. You haven't spent anything yet. Okay, well, when are you going to spend something? You're going to spend when it makes sense to spend. When there's a great foreclosure that you could get a great deal on and acquire or buy, a great opportunity in business to expand or whatever. You want a home equity line of credit to give you access to capital when you need it the most. Now, there are risks with this. Obviously, the rates are higher. Again, the economy goes into a downturn. These are variable. So you see what the terms of these are. They're usually a 10-year term, and then they go into a 20-year fix thereafter. So they're variable for 10 years. You could draw on it, you could pay it down, draw on it, pay it down. It's like a credit card. After 10 years, that goes away, it locks, and you repay it back over 20 years, fixed, fully amortized at that point. If you don't know what some of these things mean, sorry, the video might just be that next level at the moment, but we got to talk about next level finance. Ask GPT about the little in-between things. So the HELOCs give you a tool, but there are risks associated with them. Mostly in that in 2008, credit lines were starting to get frozen. They would issue credit line freezes, and that's because the banks would go risk off. This is another reason why you want to start considering establishing credit now, establishing loans now, because credit is still available right now. Sometimes in a recession, credit becomes unavailable. Banks are unwilling to lend, and so they freeze lines. So once you start hearing rumors about this happening, or you start seeing some banks do it, usually what people do is they'll take that 420 or whatever their available credit is, they'll move it into a savings account. They'll bite the bullet a little bit on the interest, but they'll realize I now have access to that capital should I need it as a rainy day fund, basically. Okay? Good. So that's number 2. Now, number 3 is also a double-edged sword. You have to be careful about this one in terms of how you do it. Well, as far as when it comes to business, but that's okay. So we'll separate these. You know what? We'll do number 3 personal, and then we'll do number 4 business. That's how we'll do it. So the personal one is a lot easier. And this one we're not going to spend a lot of time on because it should be very basic. Okay? So delay. Number 3 is just delay. Do you really need a bathroom remodel right now? Do you really need a new roof right now? Can you patch the roof? Do you really need a new car right now? Can you make yours work for a little while longer? Do you really need a new washing machine right now? Can you fix it? I've personally dismantled washing machines and dryers, and multiple times with a $25 part, fixed my $1,000 washing machine and prevented having to buy a new one. They take time, but they're kind of like weekend warrior projects anyway. I find them kind of fun. So I'm a big fan of delaying capital expenditures for as long as you can in more uncertain times, so that way you can build up cash reserves. That's very important. So a big fan of this. All right, that one's more obvious. The number 4 version is the business version of this. Now this is more challenging because the easiest way to explain this one is through an analogy or a little story. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's just it's very functional. It'll really explain this one well. College-educated son goes to his father and says, "Father, we're going into a recession." And the father owns a knick-knack store on, let's say, Route 66 or whatever. And they have a sign, a giant billboard on the side of the highway. So, here's the highway. And they've got a giant billboard over here, and we'll call it some store. We'll call it Nick's Knickknacks. Okay, cool. And it's that way, 2 miles is what the sign says there, bigger sign. All right, cool. So college educated says, Father, we're going into a recession. We need to be careful. Like we should cut spending at the business. The business is over here. This is where Nick sells his knickknacks. Father says, "Oh my gosh, son, like all these reports, you're right. Like we should cut our spending. My goodness, you know what costs us a lot of money every month? That damn billboard. Let's cut the expense on this, and let's get ready for a potential recession." And all of a sudden, people don't know about Nick's Knickknacks anymore, and oh my gosh, my sales are plummeting. What is going on, says Nick. Nick is very sad. My goodness, son, you were right. A recession is coming. Meanwhile, the billboard's empty. Nobody knows about a store, right? So on the business side, there's a complexity when it comes to cutting off the hand that feeds you, so to speak. So you have to be very careful. There's a lot of nuance that goes into the business side. But there are often things that, on a macro basis could be considered for delay or cuts. Usually what businesses do is they will delay risky capital expenditures, right? So let's take my real estate company for a moment. House Hack, it's a real estate company. If you're an accredited investor, you can invest in it. This isn't a solicitation for it. And if you're not accredited, we have a non-accredited round coming soon. We're advertising bonds at 5%, and they convert into stock if the value of the company goes up, blah, blah, blah. More details on that, different video, different topic. This isn't the place for it. But what we've done is, we've realized we have many options to rapidly expand the business in potentially slightly more risk on moves. And for us, like for example, certain types of lending, real estate related, or fintech style lending in places where it doesn't exist in the real estate market based on equity in homes beyond what's available with traditional lenders. Going into a recession, that last portion of equity is the most uncertain in a property, and that is the greatest risk. So it might make more sense to delay risky allocations of capital like that In addition, businesses usually will cut extraneous staff. Again, you don't want to cut the hand that feeds you, but extraneous staff, where projects can be handled inside that are great enough to handle the progression of the business, but extraneous staff for potentially those expansionary projects, or hey, you might be useful one day, those are the first sets of staff to unfortunately get laid off. The earlier businesses do this, the more capital those businesses preserve, the more insulated they are going into a potential risk-on environment, and the more, at a more opportune time, they are able to deploy into that riskier move, which could be a big growth move for the company. Like, oh, maybe Nick Snicknack is like, you know what, we're going to invest into making this an electronic billboard, right? So let's say it was a regular textual sort of paper or cardboard billboard, if you will, a painted billboard, whatever. Maybe they want to invest into an electronic one. Well, the paper one is probably good enough right now because the electronic one comes with risk. You know, you might convert 100 cars on the metal one. How many cars are you going to convert on the electric one? Well, we don't know. That's a question mark. You could convert 200 cars, but you could also convert 50 cars. So there is risk in something that seems like it would be a strategic investment, but usually companies during uncertain economic times say, let's not explore what that question mark is, because we have less capability in a recessionary time to handle the potential negative externalities of the downside risks of this that we're unaware of. You know, hindsight is 20/20, but when you're making decisions for the future, it's very difficult to say, oh yeah, with certainty, X will happen. Nobody knows with certainty what is going to happen. So delaying risk, staff layoffs, extremely common. So we talked about the ad risk. Okay, good. So that's enough on biz. Let's now talk about number 5. Okay, so number 5 has to do with your personal credit. Now, personal credit is very interesting. I recommend, if you don't already have this, you should know what your credit is. Download an app like Credit Karma. This is not sponsored, or whatever. There are plenty of apps that let you check your credit. And go in the App Store, download some form of app, and figure out what your credit is. And then what I want you to do is maybe after you establish your credit, but I'd rather you do it now because you could always unfreeze. What I want you to do is I want you to freeze your credit. The worst thing that could happen to you is there's a downturn in the economy, and then all of a sudden you lose your job, you're trying to get a new job, and they run your credit for your job, and your credit score is 400 because somebody stole your identity, and oopsie doopsies, now you don't get the job, or you can't get the loan, or you can't start your business at the most opportune time to do it because somebody hacked your identity. Everybody has your social security number and date of birth already. They're on the black market, they're available. You're just waiting for that scumbag to go into Macy's, open a credit card using a fake driver's license with their picture on it and your name and date of birth on it, and then they type in your social security number into the little pin pad, and boom, they steal your credit, racking up thousands of dollars of expenses at Macy's or wherever, and you don't even know about it. It's how easy it is to steal your credit. I want you to know that this is free, okay? You do not need to, you can, but there are plenty of companies that offer these credit lock features, and you have to be careful. There's a lot of branding around this. They try to sell you $30 monitoring services. A lot of these monitoring services are really just insurance. And they say, if your credit gets ruined, we'll help you pay out some money to you and try to get back on your feet. Good luck. It takes forever to get the claims done and all this. It's better when that scumbag goes into Macy's and steals your credit. I don't really want to deal with monitoring where somebody's going, your credit was just stolen. Thanks, bro. And I don't really want to deal with an insurance company going, hey, I got robbed here. Insurance, will you pay out on this? Well, on section 72 of our terms and conditions. And I just don't want to deal with that headache. I'd rather some scumbag go into Macy's and they try to put my credit number in, and my name, or their name, my date of birth or whatever, and social number, and Macy's runs my credit, and it comes back 000. Okay? My credit comes back 000. They're not going to issue me credit at Macy's. And that's exactly what a credit freeze does. Now, These are now, by law, mandated to be free. So they are free credit freezes. And I'll just use these as bullet points now. What you're going to Google is you're going to Google Experian credit freeze, Equifax credit freeze, and TransUnion credit freeze. They're free. You should do it now because otherwise you'll never do it. If you're anything like me, you'll never do it unless you do it right now. Google these, Google credit freeze, and then here's what you really got to know. You can unlock it at any time. It is a little bit of a pain in the butt because you got to log in, you got to save your two-factor, your username, password, obviously save that all in a safe place. And to unlock it, you have to log in and press unlock. And usually what I do is a temporary unlock, so it automatically refreezes in the future. So just consider that. All right, next. This one's a little more basic, but I don't think people really understand the risk sometimes that they're exposed to. In jubilant markets, everything goes up. Meme coins, unprofitable companies, profitable companies, great companies, bad companies, and everything in between. Everything goes up. Problem is, what happens when it comes down? And so you really want to de-risk. Something to remember is cryptocurrencies, for example, and this isn't a bash on cryptocurrencies, it's just a fact, have not been through what I would consider a real recession. In 2020, we had a lot of pain, but we got bailed out. We had a 30-day basically recession, and it was basically V-shaped recovery, right? This is the most money printing we've ever seen in the history of money printing. It was ridiculous. There'll be a lot of hesitance to this today, which actually could potentially draw out a recession. But cryptocurrencies haven't been around. They were born out of the 2008 financial crisis. They haven't been around long enough to prove that they could stay and survive through a recession. There's a lot of risk here, mostly because money evaporates. It's not like when the price of Bitcoin goes from $100,000 to $80,000, somebody made that $20,000. It literally just evaporated into thin air. Just like it was created out of thin air, it disappears in thin air. And that creates a lot of risk for you, depending on how much of your portfolio is exposed to assets that just haven't been tested during a recession. So, this is not anti-blockchain. I'm a big fan of blockchain and the goal of a decentralized common international currency. But it comes with severe risk. So as bluntly as we could put it in a non-financial advice way, de-risking is going to include crypto, small caps, honestly, even large caps, and even to a lesser extent, right? So I'll just put lesser because really everything. As people flow money out of the indices, large caps get affected heavily. But even recession, recession beneficiaries. But this is where there are opportunities. So an example of a recession, beneficiary, in my opinion, would be something like a Rocket Mortgage. Brilliant move to acquire Redfin, by the way, different topic for a different video. But a recession beneficiary is a company that might actually do very well as a result of a recession. I personally think my version of this is my own company, HouseHack, because we're without any bank debt, we're primed to take advantage of low interest rates and really good deals in real estate. But a company like Rocket Mortgage with a lot of high interest rate mortgages on their books, on their balance sheet, I think, or even other mortgage companies, it doesn't matter to me, it could be any company. These companies will benefit from rates coming down, from a surge in refinancing, in my opinion. Yes, there will be job loss, but even if we go to 20% unemployment, that's 30 million people unemployed. 30 million minus, about 160 workforce, you have 130 million people employed. Usually the argument people make against mortgage companies is, but if unemployment's high, who's going to be able to refinance? Okay, well, if unemployment's high, the other 80% of people who are still employed can refinance. So yes, when rates come down, mortgage companies are beneficiaries. The downside is you can still go down in value before you get to the market realizing that, and you get that upshot. Like, I kind of think about it like, all right, quick analogy. When let's say you're, sorry, I'm a pilot, so the jet references and plane references. If you're coming into land on a plane, like a propeller plane, like a Cirrus or whatever, and you're like, crap, I got to go around, I have an unstable approach, and you want to go around, you hit the gas, and this thing just lifts, and then you go, stay below your critical angle of attack and get out of there. All right, bulk landing, you go around. You have this instant power to that. That's not how recession beneficiary stocks will work. In my opinion, those stocks will actually move more like a jet when it goes around. So now this is interesting, and you might not think this is how it works, but it is. It's incredible. With a jet, if you decide to go bulked at the same point, and you're going to go bulk landing, you might, try to pull up that nose, but the actual trajectory of that plane's still going to sink, probably for another 4 seconds or so, and then all of a sudden you'll be able to rocket ship out. The reason for that is there's a massive delay in jet engines. So if you're at idle throttle and you go in, you can literally sit there and count to 4, like 1, 2, 3. Whoa! It's crazy. That analogy is, I think, useful for this because I think that's what could happen with a rocket mortgage, where it's like, oh, all stocks suck, all stocks sucks, oh wow, that company's really benefiting. And there's like this delay to when people realize it. All right. Then, as with this, there's something that I wholeheartedly believe in. It is a form of de-risking, but tip number 7, this sounds basic, but people listen to this and then they don't listen to it because they think it's their money. They think like their portfolio is now worth less. It's not your money. Please, 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 please get out of margin. Very dangerous. Realize that in real estate, a home equity line of credit, a 30-year fixed rate mortgage or whatever, you don't have the risk of a margin call, whereas with more volatile markets and margin debt, you have the absolute risk of having your portfolio liquidated at the worst possible time. So margin debt is very, 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 very bad for the consumer in a rough economy. That's pretty obvious, but people still don't do it. So hopefully this is your reminder to do it a little bit at a time. Maybe take a little bit of money off the table every single day. Just slowly get out of the margin debt. All right, now, number 8, you need to be resistant to AI. So how do you become AI resistant? We have to figure out how you can provide more value to the economy, whether that's you becoming a mortgage lender because you want to be part of that rocket ship. It's becoming a real estate agent, an architect, an engineer, a licensed contractor. Maybe you're working at, whatever. I'll use this analogy. And I feel very bad for people in this situation. Let's say you're the manager of a Target and you're a mom who's 38 years old, single, and you have 2 children. It's very difficult in this situation to get ahead because you might be paycheck to paycheck in a situation with people helping take care of your children while you're at work, and then you're stressed and exhausted after that. This is a very difficult situation to get out of. And it generally comes with having to figure out, how can I provide more value to society? Is it going to be, taking my managerial experiences and this is the hard one, it's tough to apply for jobs in this environment. And so then you look and go, okay, well, if you become a real estate agent, now you literally spend no time with your kids because now you're trying to work nights and weekends. Become a lender, same thing, but you could work from home. Really the best thing you could try to do is try to look at what, with your corporate experience, what are other companies looking for? Is that learning SQL? Is it learning some form of, coding management? Is it becoming a, chartered financial analyst? I don't know, whatever it is. There's something you can study to help you get up the corporate ladder. So you have to leverage the experience you have and take that that hard time out of your day, that extra cup of coffee, and really try to grind towards, how can I go from being the store manager to a district manager to the next level? It is extremely difficult to do, but you need to figure out, somebody else has that job, there are requirements for that job position, figure out what those requirements are and go get it. But this is true for everybody because you have to become AI resilient. You have to figure out, how can you get up the ladder to increase the income. So increasing your resilience here is all just a euphemism, basically, for you need income up. Okay, how do you get income up in a recessionary time? It's hard. You have to figure out how to triple down on the value you provide. You have to figure out how to increase the qualifications that you have, and you're just going to have to work more. It sucks, but it is the most critical time to work harder and never give up. Do not give up. Good. Next, time. We have no idea how long this is going to take. If there is an economic downturn, maybe Trump could issue stimulus checks tomorrow and cancel all tariffs, and the market could go straight up. We have no idea what's going to happen in the future. But if we are going to go into a downturn, it's worth noting that we have not had a very long downturn, extended downturn in 2008. The 2008 downturn was maybe 15 months in total, depending on where you measure it from. Some people like to measure it from January of 2008 to March of 2009 is how some people measure it. Some people say that the true pain was actually only August to March, which if you look at that, this was actually a relatively short financial crisis. That's, 4 months plus 3, that's about a 7-month financial crisis. An extended drawdown, like something you've had coming out of the Great Depression, where you have lost 15 years of time, or potentially more recent, the 2001 dot-com bubble, which technically was 2001 to 2003. So it was about a 2.5 year, 2.5 years. Most people agree it was about 2.5 years. If you invested during some of these peak levels, you didn't actually see a return of your money, not on your money, of your money, for about 15 years. So that's a very long time. It's a lost generation, really, if you think about it. And so I want you to think of your staying power in the face of time constraints. Time. I don't think we're going to see a 2020, whenever that next time hits, 2020 kind of sort of recovery. So recognize time is a big requirement here, which is challenging because we generally expect things to happen much more quickly, and I'm a victim of that myself. Okay, so now when is the time to actually buy the dip? Well, the technical bottoms in recessions generally occur about 3 to 6 months before the end of the recession. All right. So how do we understand that? Well, the end of recession is usually, let's say it's here. Okay, this is the actual end. I'll just label this. Okay, end of recession. That's when it's actually over. Typically, the stock market hits its lowest point and starts recovering, sort of a V-shaped recovery, if we will, and usually they go higher after the recessions, right? So let's assume we came from there. So there you go, okay? If the end of recession marker is here, the stock, it's very difficult to time, but the bottom of the market is usually here. And the lag between this point and this point is generally about 3 to 6 months. That's because the lowest point in the stock market is usually going to be at the time of most fear and panic. It's generally not when the recession's over, because the recession's over when you're already in recovery. When you're coming out of that turn, right? So the bottom will come before. And one way that I think you can measure this, the bottom, is you could use this ticker. This is no guarantee, right? But use this ticker, TLT. It is a bond ETF, and the maturity of these is about 25 years, U.S. Treasuries. None of that matters. True recession fear pricing. I'm going to give you a schedule. No guarantees of this. But I would say that $100 on TLT, it's like 90 now, is recession fear in. Okay, recession fear priced in. Okay, then I would argue that 120 is probably recession pricing. So the TLT goes up when the economy is more poopy, right? Bond values are going up as yields are coming down. I would argue that something in the range of 140 to 160 probably aligns with the bottom, because that would be, historically, this is where TLT has peaked out, and it is usually the sign of complete capitulation in markets. So at this point, at this indicator point, it may make logical sense to just buy the dip on everything in the stock market. Obviously no guarantees, but that would be a metric that I would look at. So there you have it. 10 ways to protect your wealth during the next downturn. Thanks for watching.